Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show here on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. It's a joy to be with you as we come together in these tumultuous times. But you know what? It's in the coming together that we're going to get a lot of things done, a lot of great things done. I want you to, yes, I'm going to borrow from my father, keep hope alive. And that is something that I really do understand because in these times that many people tend to lose hope, that's really the time that you ought to be most hopeful. That's the time when you need to fight. So much is happening, and we need to thank God that we are living in a time in which we can make things right. A lot of people have the wrong idea about making America great again. America's promise is great, but our practice has not always been so. We have an opportunity, though, to make this country what it's supposed to be. So let us come together and do that, everybody. Let us come together and do that. And, I've been seeing on television a good many voters who have buyer's remorse. Everybody, don't shame and blame them because they really did mean well. I didn't agree with their vote, but they meant well. But we have to understand that we can't vote in a way where we just protect ourselves and we don't protect our neighbors. You're supposed to love your neighbor as yourself. But I guess that starts with self-love, but that's another conversation. But think about that, everybody. Think about that. And we think about that as I know Attorney C.K. Hoffler, part of the family here. Of course, she is on WAOK every at 10, what is it, at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time every Tuesday. She's on Court TV throughout the week. Former president of the National Bar Association, the largest and oldest Black bar association in the world, chair of Rainbow Push. And of course, a successful lawyer, one of the top lawyers in the country, quite frankly. And so she's part of the family here. You know that. But we welcome someone to our show we've not had before. And I'm so excited to have this beautiful, brilliant young woman, Attorney Amy Greer. She is one of Mahmoud Khalil's attorneys. And when I told several people, including my parents, that I had you, they said, "What? How did you?" I said, I have my ways. I have to thank, oh my goodness. I have to thank my sister, Attorney Adele, from oh my goodness, from the last National Lawyers Guild. She said, look, I'd come on, but you know what? I think you want to talk to someone from his team. As we talk about these young people, and Attorney Hoffler has two sons in college right now. And my niece is about to come out of Brown in a couple of months. So I think of these young people. My nephew just came out of Northwestern last year. I mean, and on, I keep on going on and on and on and on and on. So I'm surrounded by young people who are being disappeared. You're seeing them walk down the street. And I hope I don't cry when I say this. But, you send your children, and I don't have any children, but I have godchildren. I have nieces and nephews. And you send them off to college, you give them some money, and you call them, you want to see how they're doing. And you pray and pray and pray that they make it through the spring breaks. You read these stories. And now I understand why my father would not let me ride long distances with my friends. He said, if you want to go somewhere, I'll fly you, please. Because he would worry. And I get that. But you can imagine sending your child overseas or just sending them to school, and you're getting your wings, you're kind of getting your agency, and you feel very deeply, you feel very passionately. And so you, borrowing from the King and Gandhi tradition and the civil rights tradition in this nation, you demonstrate nonviolently. And yet people on the campus spying on you, taking your picture. Private organizations, police organizations. And then you are walking home from class or walking to class or walking down the street to your apartment. And people who are masked come to you and they just grab you off the street. Or you're in your apartment like Mahmoud Khalil was with his wife who is about to give birth. I don't know if she's given birth yet, but I can't believe that she didn't give birth right there. She's like more than 8 months pregnant. And people burst into your place. They don't identify themselves, and they take him away. And it took a few days for us to find out that he was not in New Jersey. He was not in New York. He was in Louisiana. What is going on here? So let's talk about this. Let's talk about this right now because this is of tremendous consequence. I want you all to like and share. Meet me, santitajackson.bsky.social on Blue Sky. I'm at Santita J on X. I'm on the Santita Jackson Show right here, right now. Everybody like and share, like and share. Please like and share right now. CK, we've been very blessed to find that a lot of our shows gain a lot of traction as time goes on. We've seen 1.5, 2.5 million people who tuned in over maybe a few weeks or months' time, and we're appreciative. We need you to continue to like and share the show. And whenever you see CK on Court TV, let them know that you want to see more of her. That is how we get our people and our voices out there. Don't say anything, CK. That's important. Be quiet. Say nothing. Thank you. So let me go. Let's say nothing. Say nothing. Well, because it's important. Because in these times, people are not framing the story accurately. Attorney Greer, let me begin with you. And so, would you let us know what is going on with the Khalil case and what happened to him in the first place? He seems like the most mild mannered of men, and he has been someone who has advocated for Palestinians and Israelis. It's just I'm like, what happened here, Attorney Amy Greer?
Sure. So I'll start at the beginning and then get to where we are right now, if that's okay.
Of course.
Well, I mean, the beginning would start long ago, but Mahmoud is a diplomat. He is somebody who's a gifted mediator and negotiator, and has been long before he arrived at Columbia. And after October 7th in 2023, when we all saw the incursion into Israel, anybody who's been working on Palestine-related issues knew what the reaction to that event was going to be. And sure enough, the bombing began, and Palestinians and in the United States and allies and colleagues began to raise their voices out of concern that this was going to become something, something, excuse me, my dog is something that it has, that we now see in retrospect, it is what they feared it would be, which is what they would call, and many would call, including the International Court of Justice, a plausible genocide. And Mahmoud and hundreds of students around the country at Columbia and around the country raised their voice as sorry, my dog is hearing me speak passionately.
Bring Pumpkin on. It's okay.
Yes. I will change my position so he can go in the other room. But they started raising their voices to speak out against the wrongs that they saw happening. And, many of the students themselves are Palestinian, have Palestinian relatives, and have, family members directly impacted, and felt really compelled to use their voice and use their collective power to try to stop the harm happening in their ancestral homeland, and to use the voice that they had, because their loved ones and communities were experiencing such profound harm that they themselves couldn't exercise their voice at that time. The students mobilized, and Mahmoud became a negotiator and mediator between the student body and the administration at Columbia. As Columbia's students and the actions at Columbia became globally known, they really caught the imagination of not just the American community, but the global community. Students and people around the world were looking to Columbia as leaders for their activism, and so all eyes came on to Columbia. And through that, Mahmoud as a negotiator between the administration and the students, and also somebody who is wonderfully articulate and a passionate speaker himself, was frequently covered, by the press and by the media, became a very visible and vocal student at Columbia that was known to a lot of people. And I think he was also incredibly effective. He was an effective communicator. He really neatly encapsulated why students felt so passionate about this, why they felt compelled to raise their voice in this way. And as a result, he also became a lightning rod. And he became somebody that was recognizable. He became a name that people knew. And over time, there were third-party actors, entities like Canary Mission and others who began doxing Mahmoud, meaning that they were putting his personal information online, and they were calling for his deportation, his arrest, and all of those kinds of things. He was experiencing progressively increased online harassment. And then once President Trump was elected, that I think that just created a free-for-all against Mahmoud as a visible person at Columbia. And so, I think all of that came together that made him just a prime target for this administration as sort of a symbol of the movement, even though I think he wouldn't necessarily call himself that. I think that's how this administration viewed him. And therefore, he very much became a target, where if they took down Mahmoud, that somehow it would indicate to the country that, this will not be tolerated. And so the harassment increased until March 8th at 8:30, when he and his wife were coming home from an iftar meal. They were breaking their fast with friends, marking the month of Ramadan. And they were followed into the lobby of their building by ICE agents. And I don't know how, but Mahmoud had the presence of mind to call me while he was in the lobby. And I spoke to the agent and was trying to find out why they were taking him, where they were taking him, whether they had a warrant. All of that, they hung up on me. And then Mahmoud's wife called me back, and we were trying to help her ask questions of the agents to figure out where they were taking him. But all they would tell us is they were taking him to 26 Federal Plaza and that his student visa had been canceled. And when we told them that he was on a green card, they said that had been canceled too, which anybody who knows immigration law knows that in general, you can't just cancel somebody's green card. It doesn't work like that. And we didn't hear from him again. So this happened around between 8:30, 8:45 on Saturday night, and we didn't hear from him again until Monday. And he's currently being held at a facility in Louisiana. And our team is working very, very hard, but as of yet, we don't know how this tale is going to end.
Has anyone seen him?
We have video calls with him, so I do have like a visual, and we've been fortunate. So I am now part of a large legal team from the ACLU National, the New York Civil Liberties Union, CLEAR, and the Center for Constitutional Rights, among others, who are working with him. And we are very fortunate that we have a number of folks down in Louisiana through the ACLU who have been able to get in to see him in person, though none of us have. But like I said, we're able to see him on video.
Of course, we're talking with attorney Amy Greer. Dratell and Lewis is her law firm, and she is one of Mahmoud Khalil's lawyers. And she's been working with CARE National and so many entities and defending these students. This has been something that you have to do. Let me just pivot to you, Attorney Hoffler, for a moment. I know Attorney Greer can only be with us for a few more minutes. But Attorney Hoffler, when you hear this, what does this signal to you? I mean, because you fight for student rights, as so that they will not be exploited as these really semi-professional athletes, in the college space. And so, I mean, because that is one level of movement, to get them to have them protected. And students are so vulnerable because they're so young. Even if you are a 30-year-old, you've not been out in the world. Presumably you are studying. But there's something that is going on because they are being pulled off of the streets, CK. They're being pulled from their homes by people who are masked in this environment, and they're being taken to only heaven knows where. What
Uh,
is that?
Santita, they're really, I can't think of words that can adequately express sort of the horror and terror that many of us are feeling, particularly in the legal profession. And I have to say this because it informs the ability of many firms to help students, such as Mr. Khalil, and others who would like to help who can't. Mm-hmm. So there are many law firms, and I'm going to start with this because we have to look at, it's not just this one act of atrocious violation of human rights and civil rights. It is the totality of the circumstances within which this is happening. So you have to look at it through this lens, Santita. Right now, this administration has targeted law firms who either filed lawsuits against the government or who have been involved in immigration issues, challenging the immigration policies, one form or another. So civil rights, challenging the administration's DEI policies, and voting rights are basic rights, but also, and particularly those who are challenging the administration's immigration policies and the ability of ICE to just, in a mass format, which is, this is something that is reminiscent, not of the 60s, reminiscent of another century, which that people try not to think of, but that's how far back this is. So when I hear this happening, I'm looking at the totality of what's happening, the threat upon lawyers, shutting down law firms, crippling and penalizing law firms that are representing clients in this country that just as we have the right to do anywhere. I mean, that's what lawyers do. The one distinction between a lawyer and other professions is that we have the ability to go into court with our license and to represent and speak for the voiceless. That is the very nature. And it doesn't matter which side of the political aisle you are on. That's what lawyers are able to do, which no other profession can do because they have that license. So for an administration to come in and to silence those lawyers, and the big law firms, many of them have struck deals with the administration, because if they didn't strike deals, they feared, not only because of pressure from their clients, but just pressure in general, they would be out of business. This is a level of putative behavior. Even the American Bar Association is involved in litigation with the administration. So we are seeing a time like no other on that front. Before, you had organizations that were perceived as liberal or progressive, civil rights organizations, the ACLU, all of these organizations were appeared to be, they are progressive. But it's no longer just the organizations that people felt were progressive that are under attack. So within that framework, within that context, we now see students who are being detained, arrested without due process, and who are being terrorized and their families because of their beliefs, because of their nonviolent protests. So when I hear that, Santita, I remember how when I was in law school in the 80s, protesting in front of the South African embassy with your father, because we did not believe in the apartheid regime. We wanted to topple the apartheid regime. And it was very incredible individuals such as Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr. and others helped here in the US to make a difference and bring about a change in South Africa. When I was in college, what we did at our dinner tables, at breakfast tables, at lunch tables, we debated the whole time. When we got in, we sat down with our food, we spent the whole time debating and expressing ourselves. College is a place. You may not be able to, in the past, you may not be able to debate that when you're in corporate America and the same level of freedom of expression. But the one place we knew that was safe, that was free, that we could express ourselves was in college. We knew we could do that. Protests, many protests happen on college campuses. That's been the American way up until recently, where students were able to, in a non-violent, well, I'm not talking about the violence, I'm talking about non-violence, civil discourse, expressing differences of opinions. And when it divulges, when it becomes violent, I'm not in favor of violence. But the vast majority of these students who are being detained, who are being terrorized, and without due process, are not engaging in violence, even when the authorities engage in violent acts against them.
Wait a minute, and private groups.
And private groups. So how does it affect me? Oh, it shocks the conscience in a way that I can say, even when I look at historically, your dad has always told us, Santita, we've been here before, we survived, and we will live to see another day, and we're going to keep hope alive. And I believe that. We have been in this place before, but generations before me fought so that we would never be in this place again. And some would say we're even in a worse place. So Seti, we're living in troubled times because the one thing that we used to love and be able to say with great freedom and liberty about this country and being a citizen of this country, or being a visitor in this country, or having a green card in this country, or having a student visa in this country, is that we had freedom of speech. That's a constitutional right. So I feel that, and I'm speaking just on my behalf because I'm affiliated with a lot of different organizations, but just as me and as someone who's been an advocate for people who don't have a voice, it shocks the conscience. It really does. It's shocking. It's stunning when every morning you wake up and you're reading things. I mean, we also have an extraordinary attack on the judiciary. Judges who are rendering opinions, if they are not favorable towards this administration, they are being ostracized, and their families. And we know there's already an uptick in violence against judges, even before this administration came into office, came into power. So we're just living in very, very difficult times with these challenges. And what has happened to this young man and his family is systemic of what many are experiencing, especially on college campuses. But I'm here in Georgia. In Georgia, these ICE officials, they will go to schools where you have, let's say, schools in certain parts of Georgia and throughout the country that are heavily populated by children from immigrant families. So the kids may have been born here, so the kids are U.S. citizens. So the information that we're getting is the ICE officials will come. Some of the parents will drop them off early, like at 5:30 or 6 o'clock a.m. because they don't want to be arrested, deported, detained, and God knows what will happen to them. But the ICE officials are meeting them very, very early, and not just taking the parents, but taking the children, because they are of a view, oh, we don't want to divide the family. They're all going to get deported. So there are a lot of things that are happening right now, Santita, that are things that are disheartening, to say the least. But I am optimistic. Because of what history tells me. But you have to know your history. And so the efforts to prevent knowledge of history is troubling too. But if you know your history, we know that this is all cyclical. Are we experiencing things in my lifetime that are unprecedented? Yes, in my lifetime. Not in your dad's lifetime, not in my parents' lifetime, but in my lifetime, in our lifetime. And so I'm very, very troubled. Amy, I'm delighted that you're representing him. And when we represent someone who has been unlawfully detained or treated in a way that we believe is against our Constitution here in the United States. And I did hear you say he's a diplomat. Did I hear you say he's a diplomat? So did you say that?
He's diplomatic. Yeah,
Okay.
he was going to the School of International and Public Affairs because he wants to work in diplomacy. That's
Okay.
what he wants to do. Yeah.
And he's comported himself that way.
Well,
I think
his conduct has been. I thought he was actually. I thought you were saying he was a diplomat, because I was like, well, what happened to diplomatic immunity? But that is also being challenged in some instances as well.
Yeah.
But I think, Santita, a lot of work has to be done. A lot of work ahead, and there are a lot of organizations, individuals, professionals in every single walk of life who are incensed and within their lane. Everybody has to operate in his or her lane, not someone else's lane. If it's not for you to protest, then there's not for you to protest. But there are other ways that you can express your utter disagreement with actions that are being taken. And I think that's what people are doing now in this country. They're finding new ways to express themselves because they said, okay, we can't do things business as usual. We're not going to engage in violent interaction. We're not going to be confrontational, but there are other ways that we can address and we can protest, whether it's in the street, in the classrooms, via writing letter campaigns, calling people. There are a lot of ways that people are expressing themselves to protest against these actions, which many perceive are heinous, unconstitutional, unfair, un-American, and inappropriate.
Well, let me ask you, because all of that is absolutely spot on, Attorney Kahafler. Attorney Greer, what else is happening to these students? Because at the University of Chicago, several of these leaders, the awarding of their degrees were held up. They were being withheld, actually. And slowly but surely, they've been getting them. But some of these young people, some of these students have been expelled from school. I mean, what is going on here? Please explain what's happening to them.
Yeah, sure. Well, there's so much to say here. One of the things I'll just lift up, because I think Mahmoud would be upset if I didn't actually, is, the students who are being taken in such sort of viscerally disturbing ways, as we've discussed, off the streets with masked people who aren't identifying themselves, etc. One of the things Mahmoud always lifts up is we are getting visibility because of who we are. But there are people who I am here with who have been languishing in these facilities for months and years at a time, who don't have the visibility that I do, who don't have the media attention that I do, who don't have the access to all the attorneys. Like there's like 25 attorneys on this case right now. And so he always tells me whenever I do any kind of media that he wants to lift up the languishing people in these detention facilities who were also taken, many of whom have language barriers, some of whom can't read the forms that they're given, whether it be a language barrier or a literacy concern, and don't even know why they're being held, haven't had access to attorneys, etc. And so beyond what's happening to our students, it's important to lift up what's happening to our communities writ large, where we are having our neighbors, our members of our churches and temples and mosques taken, our colleagues at work, the people who deliver our food and who take care of our children and our teachers in schools. So many of them are languishing in these facilities without the access to the legal support, the media, etc. And so Mahmoud would want me to make sure that we were thinking about those people in addition. What I will also just say about students, I think my dog gets tired of me being on talking so much.
Hold him up here.
Well, he'll come up in a minute, but
okay.
One of the things about the campuses I think that's really critical is, these students are students. They are facing, they are building their futures now. And, the concern that we have is, sort of a blacklisting of sorts that's happening, where the students, where the students are basically being prevented from, prevented from getting degrees. They're being suspended. They're being expelled. They're also being surveilled. They're being pulled into administrators' offices and spoken to outside of the presence of advocates and attorneys, or even peers for that matter. There's no witnesses in these conversations. Students are being asked to turn over membership lists of the groups that they're part of. This community that listens to you will remember well all of the NAACP cases out of the 1950s where Congress and state legislators were demanding that NAACP turn over their membership rolls, and the Supreme Court said no, that's an inappropriate chilling of speech. That when you are being asked to turn over the groups who are, the names of the people who are gathering with you, who are assembling with you to exercise, to exchange political views, to exercise your speech and expression. Our courts have said that that is protected. And yet these students are facing something. I mean, let's put things in perspective, but a similar type of gathering of information here, where in these disciplinary proceedings, they're asked to name who they're working with. They're asked to talk about their own actions, and ultimately, in some cases, asked by administrators who are themselves attorneys outside of where these students are not being represented by attorneys. Or let me rephrase, they're being represented by attorneys or advised by attorneys, but those attorneys are not privy to these meetings, where attorneys are asking these students to reveal things about themselves that ultimately can be quite damaging for reasons I'll explain in a moment, outside of the presence of their own attorney advisors, which I would call an ethical violation as attorneys, to speak with a person who they know is represented or being advised by an attorney outside of the presence of that attorney. And the reason I am currently in the process of litigating a lawsuit against Columbia University, members of the Congressional Committee on Education and Workforce, as well as federal agency members who are asking universities to turn over student records and student disciplinary records and personal information about students, as well as withholding funding from these universities, because they are trying to get information from these universities about these students and about their associations. And on October 31st, the Congressional Committee released a really frankly frightening report. And it was frightening because of the framing that you mentioned. It really kind of took everything out of context and didn't appropriately or accurately describe the student movement. But also it put out into the world information about these students that made them identifiable, and will ultimately, like what happened with the House Committee on Un-American Activities and things like that, will label people in a way in the moment of technology where social media is so much more accessible. Where it could make it challenging for students to get jobs, to participate in our political, discourse, and also potentially in this administration face other kinds of challenges, such as immigration challenges, as well as attempts at trying to criminalize their behavior. Or their speech, not their behavior. These are most of the students that I work with are peaceful protesters and are exercising protected speech that may well find that being criminalized as well. And so all of this is extremely concerning on so many levels. And it's part of a broader pattern, and something that I hope to do with my co-counsel at CARE National and CARE New York is to make sure that Congress and these federal agencies are not able to use students like this. They're not able to demand the association roles of students. They're not able to get the personally identifying information about students. But what's terrifying is these universities are turning over students' information. They are complying and they are complicit. And this government and this administration, who knows what they'll do with that information? It's a really terrifying moment. And the only thing that I can compare it to is the WHAC, the McCarthyist era, where there was a gathering of information and a labeling of people as a threat to the United States, when in fact, the way that we are treating these students and other activists speaking out for Palestinian human rights, that we're treating them as a threat from within, when in fact, I would argue they are our moral conscience. And it's really important, I think, to make sure that they are insulated from what happened to so many people during the 1950s, some of whom were deported if they were not themselves American citizens, but many of whom were blacklisted, unable to get work, unable to participate in our political economy, to exercise any kind of political or social capital. And I really see the writing on the wall here. The agencies have sent out letters now to over 60 universities. The committee is now demanding student records from a number more universities. And so these membership rolls they're gathering, you know, these association, this associative information that they're gathering, all of this is to suppress a viewpoint that they find disfavorable or that they don't want to have lifted up in this country. And honestly, it's a slippery slope. These students are first, but we know they're coming for DEI programs. They have been. We know they're coming for our transgendered brothers and sisters and siblings. We know that they're coming for other members of our communities. And so, you know, if we don't stand up here, you know, it's going to spread. And then the last thing that I'll just say is something that I think is really critical to build on what Attorney Hoffler just said about countering all of this. In addition to everything that Attorney Hoffler said, I urge us all to educate ourselves and to continue to gather with each other, to know each other. This is fear mongering. This is scapegoating. We know how this works. And the way that we counter that is to continue to look each other in the eye, to continue to build bridges, to continue to gather, to listen to each other, to hold space for each other, to grieve with each other, as so many members of this student community have themselves lost family members in Gaza and the West Bank, you know, and our Jewish brothers and sisters who have lost loved ones as well, and Israeli brothers and sisters who have lost loved ones as well. And so all of this is attempting to isolate us from each other, to make us frightened of each other. And I think what is really critical at this time is to choose something different and to hang on to that vision of all of us gathering, all of us knowing each other, building those bridges. And I think that's really going to be a critical component to countering all of this, in addition to everything that Attorney Hoffler pointed out.
Well, you know, I want to thank you for that, because the fact is you do have a home here on this show. And I would invite you to be on our Reverend Jackson's Keep Hope Alive show. We know of other shows, Attorney Hoffler.
Mine.
She's a radio talk show host. No, because this is we have to get the story told.
Right.
Because if we don't, CK, because this is what happened to the young, because they're targeting Palestinians and Black students who are standing. And this young woman who was head of the law students at NYU's law school, she lost her position, and they are blacklisting her, no pun, from jobs. But they're doing it to all of these students all over the place.
That's right.
Okay, so I got to jump in from my alma mater, Georgetown, and I've got to applaud our dean, because the first school that was targeted was Georgetown Law, right there in DC.
Mm-hmm.
And Georgetown, many people know it's a Catholic Jesuit school. And when the administration, the interim attorney general for the District of Columbia, that's as in DC, sent a letter, and I know that I'm, you know, yelling. I don't know why I'm yelling, but this is just
I do it too.
Sent a letter to the Georgetown law leadership, saying, look, we are not going to hire any Georgetown law graduates. And the U.S. Attorney Office, or the U.S. Attorney offices, and they were broad, or really in federal government, lawyers in general, this is, and I'm paraphrasing, unless you revise, modify the policies or anything touching on DEI, including teaching DEI at your law school, we are just not going to hire your graduates. Now, in the District of Columbia, and I know this because I practiced there, and of course after I graduated, Georgetown alums just flood the market from and all walks of life as lawyers, because there are many, many law schools in DC. You've got Georgetown, you've got Howard, you've got American, you've got Catholic, you've got
VW,
you've got, you know, William and Mary, not that far. There are law schools galore in that area. But because Georgetown is so large, there were 2,800 students when I was there, and that was in the 80s. It's so large that the market is flooded with alums. So to say that you're going to take away viable employment opportunities for all of the students because they attend Georgetown, unless Georgetown changes its policies, its internal policies, and changes its curriculum is just incredible. And so I loved and I applaud. I immediately called the school and donated money when I heard about the response, which was, in essence, we are a Catholic Jesuit school. And there, constitutionally, you don't have the right to tell us what we teach, what we don't teach, how we teach, where we teach, when we teach. Number one. But number two, we're a private Catholic Jesuit school. And at the foundation and core of that school is service, is giving, is all that kind of stuff. And we are not, it is not permissible for you to tell us what we're going to do and what policies we're going to adhere to and implement at the school. And then the dean, Trina, went on to express what Georgetown's policies are, et cetera, et cetera. And then he said, so we look forward to hearing back from you where you're going to reverse what you're saying. And that because as what you're saying is not constitutional. Now, nobody's holding their breath. But the point is, Georgetown stood up, and Georgetown actually is the largest law school in the country, by the way. So I say that because the letter said Georgetown and other schools, there was something like other programs or schools. So just as the law firms were targeted, the law schools are targeted. Why is that important? Because we graduate people who are advocates. And if you're trying to impact them, when what we're doing in law school is learning how to be advocates and saying you can't do this, you can't do that, then it really changes the whole narrative of what law schools are about. And that should not be permissible. It's as interesting, that's the word I'm going to use, interesting, as telling HBCUs that they can't teach Black history. So if you have a FAMU, if you have state schools that are HBCUs, Bethune-Cookman, FAMU, Norfolk State, all of these schools, you're telling these HBCUs they can't teach Black history. Now, the execution and implementation of that is very different, but that's very interesting. That's the only word I can use, is interesting. So we are living in interesting times, but I do think that what is emerging, you can't silence people. You can't silence. You can't silence a demographic. You can't silence a race. You can't silence a religious group. You cannot silence people. What you can do is snuff them out temporarily, move them over here, oppress them, but they always emerge. That is the history of the civil rights movement in this country. So I do think what is happening is we are creating people who are being more creative in their discourse and how to oppose or how to resist what people feel is globally unacceptable, because it's not just in the US. It's happening throughout the world. But of course, because we are the dominant superpower, that's what I call us, the dominant superpower, when it happens
Wait a minute, at this time.
Right, at this time. I'm only speaking for today.
Yeah.
Because tomorrow will be very different, because you can't silence people. Because we are the dominant superpower today. And this is, I refuse to do two things: to allow anyone to teach me my history and incorrectly, or not allow me to learn my history. And number two, to allow people to define us in a way that we are not. So I think that this too will pass, but people have to find it within their own space, in their own lane, in their own families, in their own communities, in their own professional organizations, wherever they are, to be able to express themselves in a way that they feel is appropriate. And I recognize, and I know I was on a panel for the ABA, American Bar Association, recently. There was a series, it was very interesting. A lot of similar themes came out, were women. They had women of all different backgrounds. There ended up being just 4 of us on the panel. The panel was larger before, but because I believe, this is my belief, perhaps some of the women who originally wanted to partake could no longer partake because their firms had to modify their discourse even on an ABA panel discussion. Oh my goodness, what are we talking about? On a panel discussion about women, about how women are faring post-election. What happened as a result of Vice President Kamala Harris not winning? Are there different groups of women that are feeling some kind of way about each other? All of those topics that, I mean, what's wrong with discussing that? How should that be problematic? But for some, it evidently is problematic. So what we are seeing is a gradual shift and a view by some that it's not okay to express basic, common views on basic, common issues in your own country. So one thing I want to say that's connected is it's spreading everywhere.
Yeah.
If you have children, like I have children, you tell your children that they should travel with their birth certificates. Oh, yes, because I don't look any different than somebody else may look. And until you know what my birth certificate and check me out, you don't know where.
Wait a minute, hold on.
We
We're always
we're
told
in
to
a
go back
global
somewhere.
country.
CK, we're always told to go back somewhere. Now,
Yes.
I mean, because that's the sickness of our society. I'm only bringing this in because we have like 10 minutes left here.
Right. I'm sorry.
No. Because I think what we're doing now, Amy and CK, we're venting because to me, this is not new.
Mm-hmm.
When I saw Reverend and Mrs. Jackson step out here, when you had a no-talk policy on the Palestinians 40 plus years ago,
Mm-hmm.
the hits that he and our family took. I took a hit in my Harvard interview, got in, but they said they had to fight to get me through. And I'm a merit scholar. They called me. My mother said, you called her, you asked her to apply. I didn't want her to apply to your school. Yeah, my mother told them that. She has full scholarships elsewhere. I don't want her to go here because I don't like your politics. And you mean to tell me this was 40 years ago when this happened?
Mm-hmm.
This is not new. And I think what's past is prologue. And we need to understand that. That's why looking at the Un-American Committee. I mean, just McCarthyism,
Mm-hmm.
Dr. King.
Mm-hmm.
This is how we handle dissidents in this country. Now, the question is, moving forward, CK, what are we going to do going forward? Because now they're disappearing people.
Right.
I mean, El Salvador, what's next? Any of us could blend in those other countries.
That's
when they said Mahmoud Khalil, I was like, well, where is he? And I need proof of life. Put him on TV. I need to see where he is because I don't trust you all. I don't. We have Homan Square in Chicago. It's modeled on a CIA black site. It's the Chicago police. People have been marched into Homan Square and they've never come home. That's Chicago. That is modern history. So we can't act as if we're like, oh my God, I can't. No. Oh my Lord, this is how we do it here.
Right. We've been here before, Santita. You know what the difference is? The difference is social media and technology. That's a big difference because when we were there before, the reach was not as broad as it is today. Just like that, the reach is so easy.
It's like this.
I mean, it's because we get these calls all the time because our cell phone numbers are sold to this one, to that one, marketing that. It's very easy. If you have your TV on, if you've got whatever smart TV.
But CK, hold on. Wait, hold on. Because Amy, unmute yourself. Because wait a minute. Because see, now Elon Musk owns X.
Right.
See, I mean, do we have to create our own social media? Because now, I mean, we're getting squeezed with our algorithms.
Right.
Well, and also there, this catch and release policy or whatever that Marco Rubio just introduced is using AI to scan social media to find these students and identify them in order to, either deport them or identify them for criminal charges. And obviously, once that technology is deployed, that technology can be deployed on anyone who's speaking out on anything. They're testing it here, but certainly once that's common practice, it can be deployed for anyone. And I think all of that is deeply concerning. And the other thing I will also, to bring it to also speak to law schools and going after certain groups of people, something that I've talked about a lot in academic settings, particularly. I went back to law school. I was a librarian previously, and then I went back to law school. Yeah. And one of the things that I would talk about with the deans a great deal is this whole concept of academic freedom. Academic freedom for whom? When we want to have sort of politically diverse conversations, there must be an assumption that everyone sitting in this space, every person in this space, that we are acknowledging each other's humanity, our right to exist as who we are in this moment, and our right to be in this space to engage in the dialogue. If those are not assumed and appreciated by everyone in the space, then somebody in this room is having a survivalist conversation. Somebody in this room is fighting for their right to exist in this space. And that is not a political dialogue. That is a survival conversation. And so many students in these spaces are already experiencing profound erasure. Like, for example, cases taught without any recognition about the time period that, you know, a Black man is stopped and frisked without any, you know, Terry v. Ohio, without any sort of conceptualization as to the racial identity of the people involved, white police officers and a Black man, the context of the neighborhood that they were in, and why the police were even there to start with. You know, we're taught all of this stuff in a void, separate and apart from the social and political and racial and ethnic dynamics at play at any given moment in our history. And so while we're engaging in these conversations that are devoid themselves of context, we also are claiming to have these political, you know, academic freedom conversations and you know, rigorous intellectual inquiry, when not everybody in that space is acknowledging the right to exist of everyone else in that space. Taking this again from a political dialogue to a survivalist dialogue. And I think that's where we are right now.
More and more, CK.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Well, and I think that's where we are right now. We are in a place collectively where we are not having a political difference in this country right now. We are putting many people who do not look like me, by the way, in positions where they are fighting for their right to exist, not just to participate in the political economy or in our society more broadly, but that they are actually allowed to exist as they are, whoever that may be, whether, again, our trans siblings, whether that be a Palestinian person, a Black man or a Black woman, a Black trans person, you know, all of these kinds, Indigenous people are fighting for their right to be seen and fighting for their right to exist as they are in this moment. And so these are not political dialogues we're engaged in right now. These are survivalist dialogues that we're engaged in. And it's a terrifying thing to think. I'm not sure we've ever fully escaped from that in this country. I think it's been an aspiration, but I think we're definitely devolving back where more and more people are being scooped into that, where before they can even speak about anything else, they have to first acknowledge that they have a right to be alive and in this country and in this dialogue. I think we don't acknowledge that enough. And when we look at social media and we see the comments online, it becomes explicit, you know, which is what Mahmoud was experiencing as well. You know, the comments under the social media posts that were calling for his deportation and even his death were making clear that he as a person doesn't have a right to exist. And so I think we have to really hold that. We have to hold that as we engage with each other and make sure that those of us who want to live in a different kind of society are making sure that we're always starting from the acknowledgement of each other's humanity. And I'm not talking some, you know, like, you know, I want us to have rigorous dialogue, but I think we can't actually do that and engage in that if we're not fully acknowledging the humanity in each other.
I mean, that really is what it comes down to.
Mm-hmm.
You know, however you experience humanity in this lifetime, male, female, gay, straight, trans, black, white, brown, yellow, red, you know, what does my father say? Red, yellow, black, brown, and white, we're all precious in God's sight. That's really it. Because we're first human. And we're having different experiences as human beings, each one of us. But we're fully human. I could talk to you ladies all day, all night. I mean, it's always a joy to be with brilliant women because I learn so much from you and it helps me to grow. Steel sharpens steel. I'm still a little bit more like tinfoil, but being with you ladies gives me a
Wait, if you're tinfoil, my goodness.
I know. I was like, I don't believe that for a second.
Oh no. No, you all are brilliant, and I thank you. We thank the military for their service, and we should.
Yes, yes.
But I have to thank Attorney C.K. Hoffler for your service. I have to thank you, Attorney Amy Greer, for your service because you serve the least of these. We serve in so many ways, everybody, in so many ways. And the fact that the Khalils knew that they could call you in in a in a place in a world where they didn't know who their friends were, if they had any at all. That speaks that speaks so highly of you, and the fact that you are a librarian, someone who's been reflective and been quiet. And look, I'm a bibliophile, so look, I love you because I mean, I've got thousands of books. Yes, I do, and I love them. I love they're my babies. But you know the fact that because it shows me that you have served. CK has done extremely well, but she's always getting these carve outs so that she can serve, and that we have to remember that, everybody, because we're all in service to someone. Marion Wright Edelman said that service is the rent you pay for a living.
Yes, absolutely.
So I'm going to give each of you a minute before I pivot over to the next hour, because guess what we're going to be talking about? The Louisiana racial gerrymandering case. You know, the House of Representatives should be bigger, everybody. Alexander Hamilton and the framers felt that it was supposed to grow with the population. It has not changed in more than 100 years since we had about 4 times fewer people. And now we're arguing about getting one more black representative in a state that's more than 30% black. I mean, really? Come on, you guys. But I want to get some closing thoughts from you, Attorney C.K. Hoffler, and you, Attorney Amy Greer. I want you to close this out, Amy. But Attorney Hoffler, I've got a minute for you and a minute for you. Attorney Hoffler. Oh, wait a minute. Every Tuesday at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on WAOK throughout the week that's right, on Court TV. Hush, I know you won't say it. And so everybody, please tune in and let the people at Court TV know that you want more of Attorney C.K. Hoffler. No, I've said it.
Okay. I made no comment about that, but thank you, Santita, and thank you for, these are what I call courageous conversations. Quite frankly, they should just be regular conversations, but in today's environment, they're courageous conversations. We have to continue to be courageous and find areas of synergy, find areas of solidarity, because there are more similarities than differences, but you will never know that unless you do, as Amy said, reach out and look at people and talk to people, engage in dialogue and converse and communicate. I think that I'm always optimistic because of where we've been and what we've overcome and where we know we can go. Having said that, I do feel some kind of way. I do feel some kind of way, like many people. I'm not alone about what's happening and how people are feeling in our communities. All of our communities. This is not just something that's impacting one or two demographics. It's impacting the entire United States of America. So, one of the demographics that I represent is athletes. And the question for me becomes, are we going to see DEI being eliminated as it relates to athletes? Of course not. Why? Because this billion-dollar industry, black primarily and brown athletes are the ones that bring in the billions of dollars. Okay, so I just want to leave it at that, Santita.
Okay,
so
good.
I could just, call things as we see them.
Well, I'm going to add the military too. They did a carve out on that on affirmative action. But one of my
but I think that we are now in March Madness, and then we're going into the football season. And there's not going to be a scintilla, not a mustard seed, as they say in the Bible, less of any black or brown athletes because of the administration's position on DEI. Not a scintilla, not a mustard seed less. Okay. Well, thank you.
Attorney Amy Greer.
I think first of all, thank you so much, Santita, for having me and for being able to not just lift up Mahmoud's story, but the story of so many who are languishing in that detention center alongside him, and the myriad other students who've been taken and disappeared as well. I think that's really important. I think what I'd like to just close on is, as imperfect as our Constitution and as our nation is, I think it's important that there's a reason why freedom of speech, expression, and assembly were in the First Amendment. They were considered, these rights are considered critical to the fabric of our nation. And as we aspire as Americans and those who live in our country, as we aspire to be better, to be a place that is kinder, that is more equitable, I think these First Amendment rights are really critical. And so I would just say to all of us that to think that this administration is going to stop at these students and raise and people raising their voices for Palestinian human rights, to think that that's where the line is going to stop is a fallacy. And so I just really encourage us to hold tight to each other, to keep speaking, to keep gathering, and to really remember that the fabric of this nation, and indeed the very beginning of this nation, as complicated as it is, came actually from revolution and came from people lifting their voices and demanding independence. There's a lot of historical trauma that came with that as well. And also that's how change has come in this country. That's been true of the Black liberation movement, the civil rights movement, the women's liberation movement, the anti-war movements in this nation, the labor movements in this nation. There's so much in this country's history where we have been made better by people exercising the same rights these students are exercising. And we need to recall that, as Attorney Hoffler said, we need to learn our history and learn it ourselves, not let other people tell us what that history is, and learn it from people who want to share that history as it should be, frankly, and to really hold tight to those rights of speech, expression, and assembly. I think it's really going to be critical as we move forward that we don't forget that it's first for a reason.
And as Paula Garcini Zipser said, one of the founding members of the Morning Star Clan, she said, "Thank you, Attorneys Greer and Hoffler, for your great input tonight. Just so that you know, she wants you both to run for office."
I'm going to stay on this side. I'm better as an advocate than I am as a political person. But thank you so much, Paul. That was very nice of you.
That having been said, and that all that you have mentioned, both of you, that is what makes America great. I love this country. And I love it so much that I criticize it. And I dissent when it's necessary, so that I can make this country, so that together we can make this country as great as it ought to be. As Dr. King said, as great in practice as it is on paper. America can truly be great, and we're going to get it there. Not again. We've had our iterations of becoming great over and over and over and over again. But we make America great by going forward, but not by going backwards. By going forward. The beauty of this country is that everybody is here. The most vibrant culture in the world is from the United States, because everybody has had an opportunity to contribute to it. What a beautiful country. When you see a young white athlete, Joe Burrow, who was raised in poverty, who gives his millions away because he doesn't want anyone to be hungry or poor. He's a white boy. He's a white child. Dennis Kucinich is white. He never forgot that he was raised in a car with his parents and 8 or 9 other siblings. This is not a color thing, everybody. Yeah, we've racialized our issues. Absolutely, we have. But you know what? At the end of the day, we're all human.
Yes.
And we have got to get over it and so that we can get what it does. I guess James Brown, that great prophet, said it best: people, we got to get over before we go under.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, James Brown. All I can't do is squall for you. But
or how about it's a jungle sometimes and makes
it
me
makes me wonder how you keep from going under. Wait a minute. What?
Oh my God.
There you go. Come on. She's a rapper. Okay. AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. Santita Jackson. show. Oh my goodness. C.K. Hoffler, rap star.